Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to our online friends on the East Coast and other later times. Thank you so much for joining us for the B-Civic Summit, live and in person, live online, hybrid, the whole new world we're living in. It's really wonderful to be here with so many people passionate about similar things. The energy in the room is electric. I hope y'all can feel it through the digital divide we have a little bit of, but I'm sure there's great chats going on the platform as well. So my name is Shanda Vengus. I'm the founder and principal of Fourth Wave Strategies Consulting. I'm a proud member of the B-Civic Advisory Board and on the planning committee for this summit, which I have to say, if you are looking for a great volunteer opportunity, sign up to serve on one of the summit committees for next year because it's such a great group of people to work with and you get to plan this fabulous event. So if you want more of some things, you can have a say in that. So sign up to volunteer. That is not in my script, but I just would recommend that to folks. So I'm so happy to be here today to get to introduce, I think, a speaker who needs no introduction, but some of you may not have had the pleasure of getting to know Chris Jarvis in the past. He's spoke at our summit in earlier years. He's online with all sorts of education and training for people in our profession globally, and we're so lucky to have him here today. So in the platform, you can read Chris's full bio. He gave me full permission to not read it all to you because it's always embarrassing to hear all these wonderful things said about you while you're sitting in the room. And it's so long, he would have no time for his presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Jarvis with Realized Worth to talk about Nudge for Good at Work.
That's great. That's one of the best intros ever. I sit at events and I think about how we kind of put things together, and I find that I'm more interested in learning about a person after I hear what they have to say. Like our opening presenter this morning, bought his book in session, signed up to his podcast, shared it around to everybody I know. I mean, I was all in, read about him, but at first I was kind of like, he wrote a book. So if you're feeling that way, I totally get it. One thing I should tell you is that I have a condition, Tourette's syndrome, and it doesn't usually always occur. So if you're seeing it for the first time and we've met before, it's just because it's new to be out on the stage again anywhere after 2 years of being basically living in a closet with a few plants. So I'm very happy for it, and it's not a bother at all. Okay, so I should tell you, for those of you who don't know me, we work with companies on employee giving and volunteering, as you just heard. And we've had the privilege of working with companies all over the world. We've done some projects with the UN to try and mobilize employee volunteering around the world. But this latest project that we're doing is one that I'm really excited about. And I just realized I don't have a clicker or anything to do my slides. There's a big green button on the one that I'm, ta-da, there we go. There's the big green button. Okay, so, I'm going to take us through a bit of a journey into a concept known as behavioral science, okay? Or you may have read the book Nudge Theory. Has anybody read Nudge? The book, it came out in 2008. It's yellow? No? Okay. So there's that one. But so given the fact that we may not be familiar with it, has anybody taken a behavioral science course, just so I know? Oh, dang on it. Okay, so any university level? Oh, no, okay. All right, so I'm gonna be coming back to you as educated experts in this space. I'm not a scientist. I'm an acquirer of knowledge. But I like acquiring stuff I can use, which is a bit utilitarian, maybe undermines the whole scientific endeavor in the first place. But this is good stuff, and I'm really excited to talk about how choice architecture, nudge theory, behavioral science applied to citizenship can revolutionize some of the things that we're about. So I'm going to be coming back to those of you who are in the know, and I expect you to participate. But I want to give you a little reward here if you do. This is some work that comes out of the Institute, RW Institute, not the Realized Worth Institute, but the RW Institute. We probably should rename it sometime. And this is an overview of every tech platform we could find on the planet in 2000 and I forget when this one came out, 2021. We have a new edition coming out next year, and I have a handful of these I would love to give to people. So as a reward for participation, instead of a free iPad, which I usually promise and always lie about, I am I do have these here. You can see it. So I will be throwing them into the audience like a t-shirt, so be sure to catch those. Okay, here we go. So in 2002, this guy named Daniel Kahneman, I can never pronounce names, he wrote a book. Now see, I fixed psychologist. There's no phycologist around, I don't think. Let me check with our educated folks. Nope, okay. So that's a spelling mistake. Sorry, these are the old slides. And in 2002, he won a Nobel Prize for his work around fast, slow thinking. Anybody heard of that? Read that book? Okay, keep your hands up over there. Like, no, oh man, okay. 2008, I'm looking for social proof. I'll explain that later. 2008, one of his students, Richard Thaler, won another Nobel Prize. They're handing them out to this group like crazy. And they wrote this book, Nudge, in 2008. He and his co-author, Cass Sunstein, wrote it. And Cass Sunstein went to work on with the White House administration under Obama. And Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize, and he's working with the University of Chicago and other institutions to advance this idea of behavioral science. But it comes out of behavioral economics, and we'll get into that in a second. In 2010, countries around the world were reeling from being broke because of the banking choices that were made and the crash of 2008. So they called together a group of individuals, I think it was 5 or 7, and they formed the Behavioral Insights team. And that was the first BIT unit, that's what they called it. And they were given a charge by the UK government to do something with behavioral science. And that was, they wanted to address economic issues nationally that were the result of certain behaviors among citizens. And they needed to change the behaviors. And usually as human beings, we think about carrots and sticks, right? Do that wrong, there's a stick, do that right, you have a carrot, right? Behavioral science was suggesting that human beings don't really operate that way, not typically, not for most of our decisions. And they brought in these insights to the UK Cabinet Office and had some immediate outstanding results. I'll come back to those results. If I forget to, just raise your hand and we'll get to that. But in 2017, nudge units started to be created around the world. And in 2022, the OECD has noted 202 institutions globally. And one of the slides I was going to show you that you'll get in the follow-up slide deck is a list of the organizations around the world that are doing it. And it's every acronym for the US government you can think of. The IRS, the DOF, the DAD, the UCD, the OEC, whatever they are, they're all in there. Everybody is using these insights and these and nudge theory in their work. And interestingly, to great effect. Okay, why? Why is it being adopted so rapidly around the world? Because new ideas usually take a long time to spread, but this one has grown exponentially. Nudges are expensive. When the UK government formed the nudge unit, they said, look, we want to achieve something that's national. You don't have a budget, and it has to be reproducible, and we want it within the year. And so they looked at certain things that were going on. One was, and if you buy the book, it was by MIT Press, Michael, I can't remember his last name at the moment, really great guy. He's done a lot of videos online. Actually, after I read the book, I emailed him and we got on the phone together. So he's very accessible, cool individual. And he was saying that when they were doing this work, one of the things, the examples in the book was getting people off the dole, as they call it in the UK, but it's social support or unemployment insurance or employment insurance. And if they could get them off just like a week earlier, they could save billions of dollars nationally. So they made a few changes using behavioral science in how they were inviting people to show up to work fairs. And you can read it in detail in the book, but it was just as simple as putting the person's name at the front of the email, which we get. Then they took some evidence around why people think good things happen to them. So if I said why something good has happened to you, is it because you worked hard and put the effort in, or is it because it's luck? Okay, it's because you worked hard and you put the effort in. That's why good things happen to you in life. This is something you teach your kids. Put up your hand if you believe that. All right. And the rest of us, or some of us, I'm interested to see how many people think, you know what, I have put a lot of effort in, and sometimes I put no effort in, and it just works out. So I'm on the luck side. You raise your hand. All right. So it turns out globally, people are 50-50 in terms of this perception. All they did was put a line and say, you have worked so hard at getting a job. Best of luck. Boom, boom. Had both groups. Okay. And then they put their name at the end. So Roger, we really hope to see you there. Alyssa, I'll be there too. And that was it. It was, I can't remember the data, I don't have it right here, but you need to read that book to just see how that simple intervention changed everything. Now you're wondering, well, okay, that just is common sense. We're gonna get to the science here in a second, and that's where it starts to all get a little disturbing. Incremental results at scale up, add to big changes. This is what they found for the BIT unit in the UK, and that's been replicated around the world. And nudges are scientifically based and verifiable. Now that is the most interesting part of this. You can run, and we are with Nudge the Good. It's an initiative to bring behavioral science to the practice of citizenship where it involves human behavior. And we are going to be running with the University of St. Gallen, which is like an Ivy League school in Europe. We're going to be running random control trials with one of our companies that's signed on to this to see which interventions work. Because as I said earlier, I'm not really a good person when it comes to science. That's because science doesn't care whether it works or doesn't. It just wants to prove the hypothesis is right or wrong. And knowing what doesn't work is just as important as knowing what does work, obviously, when you think about it. So these RCTs, random control trials, or A/B testing, provide really good data and insight. And my hope is in a couple of years, you're going to start seeing on stages like this, someone standing up and saying, we did this intervention, and here's what we found. This didn't work, and here's why. And here's what did work, and here's why. And kind of go on from there. That'll be a radically different kind of conversation than what we typically call best practices, which is that big company is doing it, looks like it works for them, we're going to do it too. So there's some rigor behind this, and we're pretty excited about that. So this is Daniel's book. You can take a look at that and buy that book. It's really interesting. What he posits and won a Nobel Prize for, and pretty much is universally accepted right now, is that 95% of our decisions are made in system one. There's too much information. We don't know what to remember. We can't know everything. We need to make a decision fast. And so we use a lot of shortcuts to make these decisions. And we are randomly responding based on how our brain is configured to our environment. 95% of the decisions about how you move your body, what you do, where you go, what you respond to, what you see, what you remember, what you respond to, where you go in a conversation, all salience, all just responding to cues in the environment. So this is where it gets kind of sad, right? Because we're not as rational as we think. And this is why it comes out of economics, because economics posited under John Adams, the rational consumer, which is horribly, horribly wrong. And when this morning the presenter was talking about, what was his name again, Aaron? Yeah, Aaron was talking about complexity, complicated systems or complex systems. Human behavior is a complex system. I mean, we can be complicated, right? But it's complex because it's hard to anticipate what we're going to do. And if you start with the premise that people are rational, you'll get it wrong every single time. So if you're running a program and you're hoping people are going to sign up because we picked something that you're interested in, we ran a survey, we found something that's regional, lines up with our purpose, we put it everywhere, we sent you 100 emails, and you have said that you're interested, and you never show up. What's worse? In conversations, you'll tell me, you didn't even know we did this kind of work. After I've had 3 of those conversations with you, like in the last year, okay, this is why this is happening. This is the sad truth of humanity. But you can understand why it would be true, evolutionarily speaking, because this is a cognitive bias codex, 180, just under 180 biases that determine what we notice and how we act. A bunch of them you were born with, and some of them you were helped shape with, but it is all hardwired into your brain, all of these. And this is true for humans all over the world. So you could be from a a country that speaks English and might be considered more Western. Other people might be from the global South and have a different set of social contexts and mores. These are all true. They just work out differently in what I do. But they're all triggers. And so as we go through these, you'll see why this happens. So there's too much information. There's just way too much information to remember. So we work through it. You're doing it right now. And I'm doing it as I'm talking. It's a sense-making process where we try to figure out what we think about something as we say something about it. That's the only way we assign meaning to anything. And this is a factor in that because I can't remember everything. What's more is there's too much information. Even if I could remember everything, I don't come across it. There's not enough meaning. And this one's interesting because nothing objectively means anything, which is why we can all have the same experience, but it means something different to each of us because we assign meaning to it, and we assign meaning to it based on our past experience and our social constructs. And so in the world today, we're seeing kind of a push, you might say, East, West, Russia, West, all this kind of, but if you look around the world, there's kind of the keeps and the shares, right? The keeps are like, want to keep things the way they are, want to go with traditional values, we want to keep things in place, we want to keep the power structures the way they're working, we want to keep people, it's working, let's keep it. Usually keeps are in a position of authority. Shares are often in a position of authority as well, but they're like, let's be more inclusive, let's bring people in, let's share. And the shares are freaking out the keeps, and the keeps are freaking out the shares, right? Which is why you can see, if you watch Russian media news, it looks very similar to some stations over here, and they kind of exchange clips together, and they're saying the same thing because both groups are fighting against the shares. The keeps are fighting against the shares, and the shares are like, how is this even happening? I thought we were a global world, and we were all into, let's be inclusive. What's wrong with that? And so it's playing out in Round one way, it's playing out in Europe one way, and it's definitely playing out in the US one way. But it's all about how we assign meaning to things, and we don't assign meaning to things based on what it should mean. We assign meaning based on this codex, what we have to work with, because we usually need to make a decision and do something. We can't deliberate on, should I get in my car today, right? Like, I gotta be somewhere. So let me give you some examples, because at this point you're thinking, well, that all makes sense, but I don't have a clear picture. This is an infographic that's kind of fun to look through. The bullseye one is the easiest one to understand for half of the room. Let me explain it while I go back to it. In Europe, like a decade and a half ago, I was in Vienna. I went into the restroom after being on the plane too long, and there's a whole line of urinals, and there are rules about where you stand and what you do, and that's a whole different conversation. And men know these rules, and women are usually like, that's all so strange. Yeah, totally is. But an enterprising janitor painted a fly on one of the urinals, on all of them, and they were able to reduce spillage by 80%, which is a big benefit to people who have to clean it, but also lowers the cost of cleaning products and that kind of thing, morale in general, and plus it didn't smell as bad. There were no signs, there were no carrots, there were no sticks, just a fly near the drain. Works perfectly. If you have young boys, I suggest you put Cheerios in your toilet, and that will work perfectly too, right? So that's a nudge. Low cost, you can do whatever you want. Nobody's gonna, there's no information. It's just, I'm gonna react to that. And that's hardwired in, and that's weird. Okay, eat your veggies, decoy effect, that's another one. Decoy effect is interesting because I can say, well, look, and you see this over and over time. The project that we're gonna do with you, it's not a big six-figure project. Usually, we do around 250. The most I could charge for this is about 25K. That will always get a yes versus it's 25K. I think we can get it down if you need to. That's now I'm like in a whole different conversation. That's anchor bias and the decoy effect. And there's a few more here that we'll skip through. I wanted to put it in here so you could look through it later. Okay. Employee engagement. What does this have to do with anything? What are the stakes here? Companies have an increasing role in social and environmental issues. Obviously, we're seeing the ascendancy of this with ESG, even if there's some things to work out there. But I don't think anybody in this room is really going to argue with that. And you can see Edelman's Trust Barometer for 2021 posited that employers were the most trusted. I'm sure you've all seen that. If you've not downloaded CECP's Giving in Numbers annually, this is the old one. There's a newer one. It's free. It's phenomenal information. They do great work. You would also see that. And then given the history of greenwashing in the private sector, legitimizing the work is critical, because right now a lot of companies that are on ESG boards as being top 10 are doing horrible things. McDonald's got on the list, even though they increased their methane output by 7%, decimating a lot of progress that we've made over the past years. They still got it because the rating agency said they didn't miss an opportunity to make money and they weren't breaking the law. So top 50 companies in terms of environmental practices. Well, the rest of us are reading that going, really? Like, I'm not an investor, so I'm taking a different view. So how your employees talk about your company is really critical, and what they believe to be true about the company. Engaging employees in citizenship as a primary actor allows them to play 3 critical roles. Number one, they can authenticate it because they can speak to it. And when they're in private conversations with you, that matters. I was in California talking to somebody at a utility company, and we were talking about what they do because they had just posted some stuff and were aware of all this kind of thing around community investment. And this person just went on about how, yeah, that's just garbage. None of that's true. Blah, 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 blah. Well, it was true, but her perspective and her own personal experience was lowering that. And so what's really interesting here is that organizational commitment, which is my connection to the company, is a great indicator of my performance in terms of productivity, absenteeism, and turnover, right? CSR programs speak to organizational commitment in that they, anybody who's involved in a CSR type program or knows about it usually has a higher level of organizational commitment, okay? But CSR on its own doesn't improve organizational commitment. And I was just reading this bit of research this morning where it was laid out even less clearly than what I'm doing right now, but which was difficult to get through over a 6 o'clock coffee. But activity or experience in the CSR program with the company is the one indicator that determines whether or not I believe it's true, right? And if you think about that, that totally makes sense. The more I'm involved in something, the more I will see it. But there's something called self-determination theory that really helps. So most of the decision makers, senior leaders at a company putting together these plans have a lot of decision and power over them. So they made it, so they believe in it, right? But the rank and file, if they don't get involved, they're like that person I talked to in California. She didn't participate in anything. She just read it from afar, and so she was highly cynical. And so the more of that she read, the more cynical she became. So it had a counter effect. So experience matters. So the more experiential opportunities we can give employees to see what we're doing, the more we can take advantage of something called the IKEA effect, which is one of the biases on the previous one. And that is, if I make it, I like it, right? IKEA furniture is demonstrably not that much better than many other manufacturers and maybe lower than less. But study after study, Michael Norton from Harvard with a couple other individuals wrote a great piece of research on this about 10 years ago. And it is called the IKEA effect. And it just, when they ask people, rate them objectively, which one looks better, always the one they made looks better. And the reason for this, you see it with your own kids. They draw this mess and you put it on your fridge. It's garbage, right? It's just trash, objectively. That's not good art. But you have brought a meaning to it that is different. And you're looking at that different. And what's more, you made the person that made the picture. So it's a biological imperative that we love what we make. Otherwise, we would have these kids and think, this isn't working out. Yeah, I don't, you should go, okay? Just go, terrible. Let's try again, okay? That was a mistake. We would never have lasted as a species. So whatever they do is kind of like, well, I can make an exception for it, an excuse for it, I'm invested in it. Are they the best kids at school? No, but you will, step into traffic for them because you have to, because you're wired that way. You can't help it. It's how you came into the world. It's how they came into the world. And it plays out in how we build furniture, apparently, too. Because when we make furniture, We bring the same kind of thinking to it. I made it, so it's good, right? The more we can involve employees in the making of what we are talking about, the better chance is that we're going to lower cynicism and have authenticators. Transformative employee engagement opens the door for collective action at scale, which is the reproduction of what the UK government did. And then the employees become effective channels through which to communicate more of the complex ideas. So, authenticators, activators, and ambassadors. That's what we're after with all of the CSR, ESG stuff. If our employees are not authenticating it, if they are not talking about it, and if they are not making it real, then we've just got a promo program. Okay. How do we overcome the 3 historic barriers? Low levels of awareness, I already alluded to that with you talking to the person 3 times in a row and they didn't even know we did the program, even though we did what they said we should do. Declining volunteering giving rates in society, it's trending down in the US and around the world. Not just because of COVID, it was trending down before that. And traditional approaches to giving and volunteering don't really account for how humans are irrational. We're using a carrots and sticks old economic theory from a guy who's been dead for a couple hundred years now. Although he made great contributions, I don't mean to denigrate him at all. So low awareness, just some stats here you can refer to later, but the one I think is really interesting is that when they went to professionals in 2021, and they've had these programs for a while, Deloitte did this survey, people at the company, 17% said, I don't even know we did this, right? And these were more mid to senior level folks who should have known that the company was doing this. So low awareness is a continued problem. Declining giving is going down. So we've been in conversations with the Gates Foundation, Giving Tuesday, and a number of other organizations looking at this. And right now, our best effort is to expand the definition of giving because it's trending down. It looks that way, like it's going to continue to go that way. It's a drop of almost 17 percentage points. So that is significant. There is more giving, but it's being given by fewer people because as the wealth gets pulled out of society and up to a smaller group of individuals, we become dependent on them to make the contributions. And in 2021 and 2022, 2 women really ruined all of the data. And I think you know who I'm talking about, the 2 women who had billions to give away based on life changes. So, but now that we're back to normal, life changes. Okay, I'm trying to be nice to everybody. So these traditional strategies don't work because human beings are heavily influenced by heuristics that we don't know about or understand. Current approaches lack the scientific rigor and insight to prove which one does and which one doesn't work and why. Employee volunteering hasn't budged by more than 3% since 2014. Which is when the first data point came out in CECP's report, Giving in Numbers. And it's based on who records. So we'll have to say that, okay? And they, 3 years ago, they stopped including the stat because it was just always there. I suppose it was depressing or whatever, and it wasn't really telling us anything, so they've upgraded it, but it's still the same. In fact, just to throw this out, and I'll put it in the other deck, the other version that you'll get. I talked to one of the large tech companies that provides the data for this, and they did me a favor. They looked at 10 of their largest companies, about 100,000 on average each, and I asked them to look at the volunteering rates by hour, because we use a 3-stage approach, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and volunteering. Stage 1, I don't usually volunteer, I'll go out once a year, maybe. Stage 2, I'm kind of in it, I'm learning something, I'm emotionally engaged, I'll go multiple times during the year, but I'm just figuring it out, okay? A lot of people that stage 2 can be months or years, but it's part of our own development as we internalize the reasons for volunteering. So I'm not going because you asked me to go, I'm going because I want to go. That would be a difference. And then stage 3, guides, there's only a small number of guides. So out of the 25% of employees who are probably volunteering at your company, 70% of the 25% are stage 1, 25% are stage 2, and only 5% are stage 3. So she looked at this and she found the participation rate based on recorded hours on the platform across 10 companies. Anybody guess? This is where we start to throw these. Okay, give me a number. What's the participation rate? You see it there at 3%, but that's everybody, including organizations that really don't have a developed program. So what would the percentage be among companies that have a or, you know, an intentional program. They have a platform, and they're asking people to log hours. 7%. Well, you're wrong, but you're still going to get one if you want. It's 4%. Okay, and out of the 4%, see, I have this up here so I can do this and not get the numbers wrong. Out of the 4%, I'm not going to ask you to guess the rest of this because it gets a little bit more complicated. But out of the 4%, let's see. In stage 1, the average hours were 7.5 hours in stage 1, and 97% of the 4% were stage 1. So out of the 4% of 100,000 people, which is 4,000 people, you've got 97% of the 4,000 people putting in 7.5 hours. Now that kind of checks out, right? Like that's the biggest group, and that fits our model of stage 1. That produced, that was 3,720 people producing 28,000 hours. Stage 2, 160 people, that was 4% of the 4%, produced 10,000 hours. And stage 3, which is just 3%, which is close to the 5, so good for them, they found them, 240 hours. Stage 3 will vary from 100 at the low end, probably a median around 250 hours a year, to a max around 900, 1,000 hours. We've interviewed individuals like that, and they're different, and they're awesome, but they are just a whole different. Can you imagine 1,000 hours this year? You're going to volunteer with somebody, and you're going to love it. Nobody's going to ask you to go. A guide is just going to do it on their own. They're going to. It's amazing. Total number of people, 4,000 people, producing 67,000 hours of volunteering. Okay, it's not bad, right? All right, here's the problem. Based on census data, like what people actually do, based on the 24.9% who are volunteering out there, stage 1 is probably around 6 hours, so it should be a little lower, and it should only be 70%. That group of people should produce 100,000 hours, not 28,000 hours. Stage 2, 25%, that's about 6,000 people producing 300,000 hours, not 10,000 hours. And stage 3 should be producing about 125,000 hours off 1,250 people, not 28,000 hours. So all up, they're reporting 67,420 hours, and they should have, the number should be, based on US data, 542,000 hours. So when we report this data and it goes into CECP and whatnot, we're kind of like, it feels like something's off. And yeah, it's off by a factor of like 100. Like people are doing it, they're just not reporting it. And that's only if 24.97% of the population is volunteering anyways. There's a lot more people who could be volunteering. And so nudge theory provides us maybe a way to move forward with that. So here was the big idea. We're going to formally apply behavioral insights to the practice of employee giving and volunteering. And this is the first time it's been attempted. I'm hoping there'll be other opportunities. Other groups will take it on as well. This is almost everybody who's now part of the nudge unit. We just created our own nudge unit like the UK government. And you can see they come from a variety of backgrounds. There are people from Target, from Bayers, well, you can see it all later kind of thing. But what we wanted to do was get academics with practitioners, with community-minded individuals together and form this nudge unit. And they work on projects with our companies. So we're working with Starbucks, KPMG, Nike, and a handful of others. And they get a selection of these individuals on their internal nudge unit. So Starbucks has its own nudge unit now around this. And then we assign a few of these people to it as well. And what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between research and practice. So you can see before, and I've already kind of gone over that. I'm not going to read all that again. But now we want to move to this evidence-based, scientific-based. There's so much data out there and provable approaches. I'll give you a couple in a second here to take this approach. But it's not, when you see the nudges, you're going to go, yeah, of course that works. But this is just sort of the little tiny step that needs to be taken to start thinking differently, because we're very carrot stick oriented. As you can see, we inherited this method of management from people who were here a long time ago, and we can move on now. They did their job for their time, but we need to move on and use these evidence-based methodologies to get people into this. We want to be able to show a better business case, and we want to increase corporate match giving by $2 billion. Why $2 billion? Because Double the Donation has estimated that there's $4 to $7 billion unmatched each year. If you combine all the companies that do a match and other things, there's about $4.7 billion left on the table. Now, is it real money? Maybe. But if companies were doing more, if their employees were doing more, they would invest more. What is the number one least utilized incentive for employee volunteering? Number one. Time off. Who said that? All right. I really do want to throw it, but I think it's a bad choice. So I'm... Yeah, that's right. So we've been at it for a little bit over a year, and we've made some pretty significant progress, which has been really encouraging. And we're about to, next year, you'll get the first bit of research coming out of a very rigorous approach out of St. Gallen's University with their research team and the head of the MBA program there. She's on the Nudge Unit as well. I don't know if you saw her, Amanda Shantz, and they're going to be running that for us, which is phenomenal because it's expensive. The reason I think companies haven't used behavioral science or nudge theory for this, even though companies have been using it for like almost a decade to figure out why people buy this jar of pickles over this jar of pickles, because that goes to the bottom line, it's because it's really expensive. Running RCTs run $150,000 to $250,000 for one project during the year. It's very labor intensive. And having we have the benefit of working with Ideas 42, which is the partner of the Gates Foundation and behavioral science. It's just, they cost a lot of money too. So all of this is being offset by a collective approach where we're all kind of working with each other. So Nike is working on the Starbucks problem and they're both working on the Target issues. And we can get our costs way down. So we had to take an innovative approach to make it affordable to bring to this space. And we're lucky we have because, like I said, we've made some good progress over the year. Okay, so this is a little bit more information about the kind of work we're doing. I'm just gonna highlight a couple of things. Nike wants to use it to see if they can overcome some barriers to helping their employees take a more active role in speaking up on issues that they're interested in. That's a complicated one, but the goal is to nudge people to sustain pro-social behaviors by enlarging the scope of their experience and changing their mind. And the way we do this, I say it all the time, but I'll say it one more time here. Experience first learning. That's the approach to this stuff. Our brains are all, you all have a neural net. And it's what it is. We used to think, scientists used to think it was fixed at the age of 18 and we all had to live with a teenager's brain for the rest of our life, which would explain a lot of issues, especially at traffic stops and lights and that kind of thing. I'm trying to do a callback to this morning. But now we know that it's constantly reinventing itself. Now, the thing is, it doesn't have after the age of 18, it doesn't get any more mass, like there's no new material. So it has to take parts of your memory that you are no longer using, break it all up, drag it over here and build a new synaptic pathway. And the synaptic pathway is triggered when your experience does not fit your expectation. So if you're going through life and everything is happening as normal and your system one thinking, yada, 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 probably not much new neural growth that day. But as you're going along and you see someone floating in the air, you'd be like, what is going on there? That is not normal. Like I know from my experience, that's not right. So now I switch to system 2 and I'm thinking about it. Now, if I determine that there's a gain or a pain point here, like a threat or a benefit, I'll continue to think about it. If I determine that this has to do with who I am and what I'm about, that's identity. I will continue to think about it. And so as that happens, has anybody seen neural dendrites reaching out to each other and connecting? Some of you who were in class maybe saw this, yeah? It's really fascinating what you can see at the microscopic level now. And these things grow and they find each other. If you keep revisiting that path, it'll grow a fatty sheath over it. The disorienting dilemma, and it'll be fixed for a while. So you stop thinking about it and then it'll go away. But that's an oversimplification. But if you can get the disorienting dilemma, and if you can start thinking about it and revisiting it over and over, This is how you change the way you see the world. If your brain does not change, if you were able to manage to keep it fixed from this day to 10 years from now, you'd be exactly the same person. You would see the world exactly the same way. If you have new experiences that challenge how you see yourself in the world, what you believe to be true, and how you act, you'll grow new neural pathways, which will allow you to see the world differently. But your brain is a set of glasses by which you can perceive the world. If you want to see the world differently, the brain has to change. You can't think your way into changing the brain. You can only experience your way into changing the brain. So if you drag a bunch of employees to a homeless shelter, they don't typically hang out with homeless people. In fact, we avoid them, don't talk to them. They're scary, they're a threat, but I'm going to go help them with their problem. That's fine. That's where we'll start. Come on in. We'll do a little bit of a brief beforehand. We'll give you some good information about why people are homeless. We'll talk about what it's going to be. And then we provide a disorienting dilemma. And it would sound something like, we came here to serve food to these men who are on the street. But we are not here to solve the problem of the poor. They're not a problem to be fixed, right? We're not even going to make a dent in nutrition. Let's face it, this is one meal once a week. So that's not going to help solve hunger. So why are we here? And people will go, wait, why are we here, right? So I alert. Then I tell them, well, all week long, they're told, get away from my stoop, get away from my building, you're a problem, you're dangerous, you're a threat. But here today, they're getting Ritz-Carlton treatment, man. We are going to do whatever they want. We're going to be smiles. They want more hot sauce, we'll do it. They want this. It's in our power. For 2 hours, they're going to know that we want to be with them. And that is going to be different. So that's our gift to them. And their gift to you, all week long, you're told what? Buy more, sell more, make more, run faster, be smarter, be prettier, be taller, be bigger, be stronger. What are you contributing? Where's your value? How much do you own? What kind of car do you drive? What kind of house do you live in? Do you got savings? What office do you have? How nice is your business card? All week long. All week long. We're not even aware of how much that messaging comes to us. But you're going to see these guys in the other room, they have none of those things, none. And you will, if you're open to it, recognize their humanity, or I hope you might. If they have value as a human being without any of those things, where's your value? If at the end of our life, we're in a box, end of our life, we get in the box at the front of that auditorium, and somebody says, Bob was great. You know, he was very well dressed. He's very polite. Didn't steal any office supplies. You know, Missed Bob. He always met his budget too. Came in under budget every year. Okay, let's hear it for Bob. Okay. That is the worst eulogy ever. If our eulogy was all about the things that we're fixated on, and that's all people talked about it, think about it, it would be a disaster. What do you want people to say? I don't know how I can go on without Bob. Bob meant so much. Let me tell you a story about Bob. I love Bob. Bob loved me. You want that connection. You want something more significant to speak to value. And so these men in the other room, if you're open to it, you may not be, but if you, at some point, you'll be open and you'll receive that gift and they'll say, where's your value? And you can leave with that. But that's why you're here, to receive their gift from them, and we're going to give them 2 hours of your life and make sure that they know they have value too. So it has nothing to do with food in that sense. It's all about who we are, right? In that sense, in that moment, you can trigger, for not everybody, not all the time, for some people, some of the time, a moment where they have this disorienting dilemma and they think, wait, what? I thought I was here to help those people with their problem and make a difference. You're telling me I'm getting something from them? And they'll think about it. They won't disagree, but they just, I just have never had that thought before. The more we can get them revisiting that thought, the more acetylcholine will secrete in their brain. They'll have the new pathway and the fatty tissue will form, but they need repeated exposure. And Aaron, this morning, yeah, you get a book for that. Aaron said, it doesn't have to be much at this point because they're all going to be out of date when the new ones come out in 2023. Which is the secret announcement that I'm making here right now. Yeah, if that happens and you can see the world differently, that's how we get a solution to the keeps and the shares. That's how we get a solution to diversity, equity, inclusion. It's not just the bullet points that go up on the wall, right? I heard a woman, I did a project, it was Black Community Urban League in DC, and they asked me to do a keynote, which I thought was interesting. And I was able to do it. But she said one of her main concerns was that the current DEI initiative provides an insulation amount around individuals seated at the highest level of the organization, white gentlemen, who now know the rules so they never have to deal with their internalized, more racist views of the world. Because if I don't do that, and I don't say those words, and I don't do these microaggressions, and I think about pronouns, I'm fine. And so DEI almost insulates people from ever having to deal with the stuff that's inside of them. And our public systems are all a manifestation of how our brains are wired. The world works based on the way we think it should work and what we think is normal and true. And as long as we think certain things are just, what are you going to do? That's normal, it'll continue. And if I, as a white guy, am I not doing this internal work and trying to pull at the threads of the system, and I just do no harm, I don't do anything for the generation coming after me. I take a fully intact, racist-oriented, power-hungry system and hand it to the next group and say, well, I didn't add to it, so good luck, right? I want to give them something better, which means I have to pull at the threads and then do things. And this is part of how, personally, I'm doing this, but I think we could get more people involved, but not in a way that confronts them with their identity, but a way that invites them to curiosity to say, do you see yourself in the world the right way? Are all your beliefs actually true? Is your behavior something that you want? And so there's a 6-step process that we work through with companies. You've seen a couple of these in different presentations already. This is just to give an example of what it looks like when you do the project. In one of our groups, the stickies that survive thrive. So you start with stickies, so the 6-step process, and by the time you get to a decision map here, we look at when people, I want to check time because I'm so self-involved. Wrap it up, we're done. It's almost time for questions. Okay, that's perfect. So there are 7 lanes here. People become aware of the opportunity, then they consider the opportunity, they make a decision to participate, they show up. That's an important one in our space. You can see decision maps look a lot tighter, but some people will say, I'll show up, and then don't show up, and you're left holding the bag for the nonprofit, and that stinks. So we include that here. Activate, engage, reflection. This is where the acetylcholine, the fatty tissue happens. We need to be intentionally reflecting. And then the recommitment. People need experiences, continued experiences throughout the year. If it's just a one and done, it's like getting a gym membership, going to the gym once and thinking, well, gosh darn it, I don't look any better this Christmas than I did last Christmas. I got the gym membership, that's a lead indicator. I went to the gym, good lead indicator. I thought about it, that's good. I read a bunch of things, but I'm still in the same place. And that is because you need experience to change your physical body, and your brain is exactly the same way. Okay, this is in here, again, mostly for afterwards, so you can look through it. I think it'll be like a PDF or something like that. And you can see where we start to dig down on the different pieces to consider. We look at the biases. How are people hardwired to respond? We'll look at the channels. How are they getting the messaging? We look at the nudges. A nudge is, these are proven interventions that we've seen in other places, bring them together. How are we going to measure it? Where are we going to get the data? And who's in charge? And for each of our barriers that we want to overcome, we go through this process. So we have some tech tables that we're launching to try and help employees use their platforms more, because it's 4% from this very large one. Other ones, it's between 4 and 6%. So you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a platform that's facilitating 4% of your population at best. We need to get a better return on that investment. So we're putting 3 companies together with the provider. Benevity will be the first one with 3 of their clients. And we're looking to solve 3 problems. How do we get everybody who volunteers to log every single hour? How do we get the largest part of our population just go in and create a profile? And how do we get people who are doing 1 transaction to do 2? If you're doing 2, you'll do 4. That's it. That's all we're going to do for all 3 companies at the same time. That'll be a big move forward in just addressing the awareness, authentication, and ambassador issue. So nudges include these things. It is complicated. It is not complex. Now, human beings are complex, and nudges don't always work. But there is a level of predictability in this modeling that allows us to have a certain level of confidence, way better than what we've been doing before, which is this carrot looks good and this stick looks bad, so everybody will do it, and nobody does. This is a much better approach. Again, some examples that you can look through here. And the geolocation of a nudge, it's very important who people are, so what department, what age, male, female, what's the background, what's their ethnicity, who people are, where they are they in a call center, are they in retail, are they head office, are they in front of a screen, and when they are. When is a really interesting one. How many people have heard the one about going in front of the parole board and when your odds of getting parole are better or worse? Okay, 90%, never, if you go to jail, it could happen. You never know. Nobody there is like, I expected to be here at some point. So, you know, I've been preparing my whole life for my jail career. I don't know. Anyways, that was a bit trite to say. So let's keep going here and pretend that never was said. We can cut that out of the recording later. 90 minutes before lunch. Do not sit for the parole board 90 minutes before lunch. Can anybody tell me why? Hangry. Yes, that is a real thing. Cognitive load comes down, you become adversarial and cranky. After lunch, way better. All right, so just that's a helpful tip. Didn't even pay for that one, that's free. Okay, and so an intervention takes all of these barriers, the biases we want to consider out of the 180. How will we know it worked? Based on other research that we've seen those 202 organizations doing all over the world, and they are dealing with complex, complicated issues, some of them. We identify our desired behavior. We want everybody who volunteers to log every single hour. Select the platform we want for the channel to communicate, which will never be a one and done type of thing. It's a multi-pronged approach there. And then the nudges, the specific nudges that we include based on the stickies that survive, thrive. And this is an intervention altogether. And we give that package back to the company. And you can be asking, did it work or not? I'll just do this. So we did this project with a very large company, one of the big 8. And before the launch of the campaign, they would see this number of unique employees participating actively throughout the year out of an audience of 30,000. That was eligible employees. They had an anniversary coming up. They wanted to make sure they had a lot more for this anniversary. And so they put in some interventions, and within 6 weeks, 20,000 more people signed up in 6 weeks. Was it the only thing going on? No, but everything else had been tried previous years. This was the only new thing that was tried. 20,000, they ended up, instead of 3,000, 23,000 within a very short period of time. So let's go to some questions.
Time for some questions. I'm going to throw out the first one and other people start to raise your hand. So I think what everyone is dying to know from the research so far, what is the fly in the urinal nudge that you found has worked around employee engagement? What are some preliminary findings that we
This
get
one's the
excited
easiest.
about?
Yeah, this one's the easiest one. Emails. They're a horrible way to communicate, but if you're going to do it, use the F-shaped pattern. Some of those folks who went to university, you've used F-shaped pattern? No. People read emails, and we read online stuff F-shaped, apparently, but we don't write that way. We put in like a missive, everything you need to know, so you don't feel like you don't have the information. Nobody wants that much information. We use typically a three email system. It works like this. Hey, and it has to do with your identity. So we will get to other questions. Hey, you're the kind of person who cares about this. I'm just curious, do you care about working with the kids or dogs because we're doing something? So this is about who you are. We volunteer like we spend money. It's about us. Person replies back, well, it's just 1 or 2, so I'll take dogs. Great. This one, I'll give you a little bit more information, give you some dates. Is there a date that would work better for you or not? Well, this date would work better. Fantastic. If you just, the third email, if you just click on this link, we'll get you there, blah, blah, blah. But by the third one, something called continuous commitment has happened where if I go back on the third email and say, I can't make it, I'm really saying I'm not who I said I was. And human beings hate that. So that progressive method, using an F-shaped pattern with as little information as possible, was a big feature in getting 20,000 people to respond in six weeks.
All right, other questions in the room? Jess has a mic too.
So I'm really interested in that figure of the 4 to 7 billion that is going unused, untapped for corporate giving. How do you improve that? What are your thoughts?
I think more people need to ask for it, right? That's number one. So there's more than 4% participating. So the first thing you need to do is get them to log their hours, which is why we're doing those tech accelerators. It's as simple as that. Just there's some simple behaviors. I need to log my hours in order to qualify. But it's not typically not a system issue. It's not that big. It's just paying attention to the way we actually make decisions.
Everybody's thinking really hard. I see back over there.
So when you're trying to incentivize, sorry, is that kind of loud? People to sign up for like a platform, do you find that or to participate in like recording hours, do you find that like doubling the donation is an effective way? No, it's not. Okay.
Double the dollar for doers is not an incentive. We've said that for years now. Yeah, what it does do is it sends a strong signal that we believe in it. So it authenticates your program, but it doesn't incentivize people who don't do it to try it. Be like me handing out a whole bunch of $100 coupons for a skydiving thing here. The only people in the room who are going to go, wow, this is great, I'll put this up on my fridge next to my kids' pictures, are the people who skydive or who have thought, I want to do that. The rest of us, that's nice, but it doesn't mean anything, right? So dollar for doers to the 75% of people who do not volunteer on a regular basis in a formal way is meaningless. And for the 25% who are doing it, they probably won't notice it because of the way we're communicating it. And they've got an issue of, this is my personal time. I don't know why you want to get involved. So there's some work to be done there in terms of internal messaging on how this is part of who we are.
I have one last question for you. Do you have any thoughts on what nonprofits can be doing to help support this effort?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And we'll be having that session later. But I'd be happy to talk to you about it because nonprofits hold the actual opportunities, right? And if nonprofits saw themselves as a partner and were aware of what companies were trying to do and the carrots and sticks that were out there from companies, they could help leverage that at the event. Even if companies knew how to make a transactional volunteering event transformative, there's nothing wrong with transactional volunteering. I come, I paint a wall, I'm done, then the wall needs to be painted. But you can make anything transformative by introducing more information, a disorienting dilemma at the beginning, and then having that reflection at the back end. And reflection just has to be, what did you experience? Was it what you expected? And just having people at the homeless shelter, the number one thing people say is, everybody's so polite. Like, they were nice and everything. People said thanks and please. I don't ask them what they expect because I know what we're bringing in based on the public idea of the homeless people. We even say unhoused. We talk about housed neighbors and unhoused neighbors, but we're all neighbors, not us and them with the homeless word anymore. So that reflection, once they say it, they're thinking, wait, why did I think otherwise? Am I thinking about this wrong? That's really critical. So that's how nonprofits can help, but they need to have that information as well.
We have time for one more question. Okay, right here.
So sorry, I'm a little loud anyway. I don't even.
It came in hot. There we go.
Within the company, because I think a lot of people here, it's more informal CSR companies and they're trying to push it up.
Yes. That's part of what's here. You need both, but very few people decide to do it at the activation phase because of leaders, but they'll consider it early on. So that this only shows up in lane 1 and 2. During where I'm actively going to sign up, that's a peer issue. That's peer communication. So even where these messages and who they're from show up is really key, because you could think, well, the CEO said we should all do it. That should be enough, but it's not. It just, now I'm aware of it. Okay, moving on. I need a peer to get me to click on the button and do it. Great question. And well timed with the slide. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Nice. Thank you so much, Chris. How many people were at the summit the year that Chris spoke and talked about the neuroscience and what happens in our brains when we volunteer? Did anybody else go down this like crazy rabbit hole of studying brain science after that? I did. And so now I'm on this whole rabbit hole around nudge. But one thing that stuck out for me when I was learning more about that is that in our brains, we have what are called mirror neurons. And it's My neurons are mirroring your neurons. And so when we have that feeling, when we walk in a room, when we feel that energy, like it's not like imaginary, it really is our brains talking to each other. It's also why sometimes you walk in a room, they say somebody walks in a room and everything goes flat. It's those mirror neurons. So Chris always brings this stuff to us that like just kind of blows your mind and makes us think and how we can apply science to CSR. So thanks so much for coming back, Chris. It's always thought-provoking and also like tangible things we can start doing, like this email thing. Like, who knew that? How did I not know this? How many emails have I sent that did not work? So thank you. So next up, we have lunch. So you're going to just exit and head down the hallway for that. You can also get headshots still if you haven't done that yet. Sorry, my notes are a little messy on here. And then don't forget, after lunch, we have 3 more workshops. Twice as nice, amplifying the impact through partnerships is in Cripple Creek 1. CSR and DEI is in Cripple Creek 2, and integrating CSR and ESG is here in the ballroom again. So thanks again for everyone, and share, social, spread the word.